Welcome to the Char Chit Chat, a podcast exploring all things biochar related, coming to you from a small sheep and tree farm in the deep south of New Zealand. Thank you for joining me, Ben, and I'd like to ask you straight off, who is Ben Elms?
Oh, start with the big hitting questions, eh? Ben Elms grew up in the UK and bumped into his wife in the town of Wanaka about nearly 30 years ago now. And I was woofing around New Zealand. And before you know it, I'm 30 years older and hopefully a bit more wiser and experienced. And these days I'm involved in something called the Dr Compost program. It's a local education on composting and gardening. That's working with Wanaka Wastebusters and funded by our local council. So that kind of keeps me busy. And I do a bit of kind of mentoring, consulting, designing kind of work, a bit of the food resilience on the side, and then a bit of a biochar hustle on the side as well. And then I live on a lifestyle block, and that keeps me pretty busy too.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you
That.
for that introduction. How many hours a week do you work on the Dr. Compost project, would you say, on kind of average?
It varies. It's kind of boom and bust. You know, we are really busy in the spring and we're really busy in the autumn. So like the last 6 weeks, it's been almost full time. And then it goes to very, very part time in the off season. So where we're just doing little bits and bobs, a bit of art, a bit of writing, a bit of the odd workshop.
And what do you do then? And when it's so busy, what are you doing day to day?
We'll run gardening workshops. Composting is the goal, is the goal is to get people making compost and not putting stuff into landfill. And getting people gardening is a great way of composting. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to teach gardening workshops as well to get people composting as well. In fact, we get more interest in the gardening workshops than we do the compost workshops. People are really hungry for that knowledge. And yeah, and then we'll write a few articles. We go to things, we go to a few shows where we have stalls and find solutions for people and get them on the journey if we can.
Hmm.
So,
And
and
are you
we
part of a
drive.
team? Is it just basically you, or do you working with some other
Oh, it
colleagues
is a
as
team.
well?
Yeah, it's a team. I contract out to Wanaka Wastebusters, but there's a team there. But I have, the resources of Wanaka Wastebusters behind that project, and so it's great having Wanaka Wastebusters there. They speak for themselves. They're pretty amazing what they're doing in so many different spaces. So so it's great. Yeah, having that support's great. I do it on my own. I'm not sure I'd be so good. It'd be so good. Yeah.
And how many years have you been working in collaboration with Wanaka Wastebusters?
Probably about 15 years now.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. And that's ebbs and flows of, but definitely now we're actually locked into quite a long, probably the first time ever we've been in quite a long-term contract. Whereas before that, it was very year to year,
Yes.
um, the funding and, the amount of money council wants to spend. Yeah. So, but now, yeah, 15 years and a very solid contract in place to provide education in this space and support for people. Yeah.
Yeah. But when did biochar first come into your awareness? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've got quite similar to yourself. I've got quite a permaculture background, and a lot of my learning has started in that space really,
Mm.
and exploration, if you like, because I feel like that's the real exploration, permaculture as an education space, and I kept seeing it and I kept reading a little bit about it. And at the time, I was just like, oh, it's just one more thing. I'm not
Yeah.
quite ready for this one more thing. When you're reskilling, you're trying to reskill yourself and learn all these new skills. Because I
Mm.
feel like permaculture just scratches the surface when you do a PDC course or something. You just, it's like it opens the door to this whole new world of learning. And the biochar was, when I started learning about these terra preta soils, and I thought, well, I'm going to come to it one day.
Hmm.
One day I'll come to it. And then I've been a long-term member of the New Zealand Tree Croppers Association, and we used to have quite a vibrant group in this area in Central Otago. Um, and You might have come across Josie Blackshaw. She's kind of almost down your way, not quite. But she ran a little workshop one day up here on a property, and a biochar workshop and just did a conical pit burn, not massive, and that was kind of the first kind of, oh, this is easy. Look how easy this is. And we just, we all learned, and we sat around talking about it. We did this kind of outside burn, and then we went inside, and I think she showed us a couple of videos as well, maybe. And that was a great kind of ignited my, I could do this. This is, because I love that kind of practical stuff, the doing,
Hmm.
and we can do this. And then pretty quickly after that, Dennis Enright and Trevor Richards, who you both know, who are both founding members of Biochar Network New Zealand, and still hugely in this space, ran a workshop in Cromwell just down the road. And it was a day-long workshop, and I went along to that. And that was the next kind of catalyst, if you like, in the learning, really getting a deeper understanding, and and excitement, if you like. I got really excited by it all. And that day they just did it in a bathtub, old steel bathtub.
Yeah.
And so then after that, I started experimenting just in a bathtub.
Yeah.
After seeing how easy it was, I had a steel bathtub kicking around, and I started making biochar in a bathtub. And you suddenly fill a bathtub with that continuous flame cap style, where you're slowly building up, and you finish with this bathtub full of biochar. It was like you made all this gold.
Yes.
It was really awesome. You'd tip this bathtub up, and you'd have shitloads of biochar, and you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm amazing. You know what I mean? You suddenly really, it's so easy. It feels like it's some kind of dark art, a bit like grafting fruit trees. You feel like
Mm.
it's this dark art that you start, you all seems really difficult. But when you go and do it, just like grafting fruit trees, it's really easy. And I feel that felt like that's what, yeah. So that was kind of that stage. Yeah, I got to that point. And then another friend who was on that workshop with me, together we said, well, why don't we start making a little bit to sell? A little artisan style, if you like.
Yeah.
And so we built some Kontiki kilns, and it started with one, and then quite quickly we built two. And we just started just experimenting with the Kontiki kilns, really. And the beauty of them was they were mobile as well, a little bit heavy, because we did a framed version originally, a tipping version originally. So they were quite heavy and a bit cumbersome.
Okay. And would you like to describe what that looks like?
Yeah, okay. So the Kontiki kiln is kind of a conical shape, probably about 1.4 meters across on the top, in a circle,
Yeah.
and then just coming down to a point at the bottom, which ours are probably around maybe 50 centimeters at the bottom. And then we had it on a little tipping frame as well. That's just allowed the cone just to sit there. And then when you wanted to empty the cone, you could tip it on. You could spin it onto its side to empty all the biochar out at the end if you
Uh-huh.
burn. And we also put a tap in the bottom, so you could either extinguish through the tap, but you could also empty the liquid easily without needing a huge amount of muscle to tip the cone over with all the liquid in it.
Mm.
And then we also had a heat shield around the cone. I'm not sure I'm describing this very well, but a heat shield around it. But we only did like a half heat shield. You'll often see, if you go online and you see those Kontikis, they're often a full heat shield all the way to the ground,
Hmm.
of like a very thin steel, got all the way around the cone. But we only did a small one, which still seemed to work well, but probably not as good as a full shield. And yeah, so that was it really. Yeah.
And when you say you made it yourself, does that mean
Oh,
you went and bought the steel and then you cut it up and then welded it together?
oh, I wish.
That's what it sounds like. What did
Yeah,
you
it does,
actually
doesn't
end up
it? Yeah,
doing?
sounding like it did. No, so what I did actually is I got in touch with the Ithaka Institute, who really pioneered this space,
Yes,
and they sent me some plans, and I have to say they were pretty basic plans,
yes,
really basic, but kind of really just focused on that angle of that kind of around 70 degrees angle of your cone.
yeah.
And they seemed to be, a lot of their research was on this angle being really beneficial. And then I've got a local friend who's a kind of, you could almost call him an artisan engineer, if you like, with metal.
Hmm.
And so he built the first one, and then he built the second one as well. Well, he's built everything we've ever built. So he built them for us.
Okay.
And also he was really clever. He's really clever as well. He would kind of, each model we made, we'd tweak it slightly and make changes. Because we then went on to sell a few as people have asked to sell them, to have
Okay.
them made. We would tweak the model and go, wow, shit, that's a bit high. The first two we made were too high. So because we'd even conicaled the bottom a little bit. So we flattened the bottom, dropped them lower in the frame. So that was, we started finding these little efficiencies through using them.
Yeah.
I have to say it was the Ithaka Institute and then going online and looking at photos.
Yeah.
And then giving that to him, the photos and this very basic design. It was super basic. Yeah. So probably, I bet some of like Frank Strie over in Tasmania, who's really been part of that Ithaka Institute development as well. I'm sure some of his photos would have come into the fore because a lot of his photos were really, a lot of his work was really out there at that point as well,
Okay.
out on the net. So yeah. And then since then we've gone to a very simple no frame model where it's just a flat bottom, sits on the ground, still has the tap in the bottom, but just simplified. You could lift it from a couple of hooks on the top, so you could lift it up if you needed to with a machine. You could person handle it onto a trailer. One person could almost get it on a trailer on their own, a
Uh-huh.
flat deck trailer. Ideally, two though would easily get it on.
Yeah, and those kilns are normally, if it's a standard sort of size, being a meter, just over a meter high, I think they're normally around 800 liters of char. And when that char is full of water, then that's could be close to 800 kilos or more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and ours would definitely be in that kind of 800 to 1,000 liter size for sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then eventually we built two more. So eventually we had four of these Kontiki kilns,
Hmm.
uh, and we have got taken them around the district and done burns on properties in vineyards and cherry orchards
Hmm.
a little bit, but not. I wouldn't say people have jumped on it. It's been very sporadic and it hasn't really grown with speed. Sure, people are knowing more about biochar, but I wouldn't say people are jumping on it as something they must do or must add to their soils, or wouldn't that be nice? It's more in the wouldn't that be nice box, I
Okay.
feel. And then you have
And
a
why
few.
do you think that is? What do you think the largest limiting factor is there?
I think the limiting factor is one, you just need to have a good biomass. So some vineyard, like a lot of these cherry orchards now and vineyards are, they might do heavy pruning. So brilliant, biomass for turning into biochar. But a lot of them now are chipping in the rows. They'll literally they'll chuck the material, all the pruning, good size sticks in there, cordons or saying for down here, cherries and vineyard grapes are really big. But they're coming through and just chipping that biomass back into the rows and back into that. So they're adding carbon in a different way
Mm,
back to their soils. So they aren't then extracting that biomass out of the vineyard to then process.
okay.
Um, yeah, well, cherry orchards, though, some of the older cherry orchards are extracting that material. because they're not necessarily on, like a lot of cherries are on wires these days, but there's so many different techniques now. But so some still are extracting that biomass, and then it's about what do they do with that biomass.
Yeah, and I
Very
guess in
easy.
the vineyards, the largest ones, they have the big tractors and a huge big mulcher on the back of a tractor. They just run up and down on one or two times, and then all that, like you say, it's all just chipped and mulched up,
And
which
it's yeah, it's
serves a
yeah,
function, except that it's using a lot of fossil fuels that we actually need to start reducing. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, so it's a catch-22, isn't it? They are great. They're adding all this kind of great fungal food into the soil, but you're right. Yeah, and that's the way forward. But saying that, so there are some vineyards that are pioneering this space or trying to move into this space. And, locally here, Ripon Vineyard are dabbling a bit and trying to get it into, slowly trying to get into their systems. We did with Biochar Network New Zealand with Andrew and Tula from Southland Carbon. You may have interviewed them already, I'm not sure, but you know those guys really well.
Yeah.
We did a workshop with Two Paddocks, which is Sam Neill's, the famous owner of those vineyards, and they are going to incorporate it into their system. They've got a huge amount of biomass, a lot of cherry wood biomass coming out of a cherry orchard they have as well, and they've set it up. They've set it up next to their composting system. They've gone with a big trench, a big pit to make the biochar in. And so we went along there and taught them how to make it. And so then it's going to become part of it's incorporated into their system. And then that biochar go through their composting system as part of their system. And then slowly over time, they'll be applying compost via the biochar via their compost. So, when you start getting those kind of bigger and quite visual businesses like Two Paddocks, like Ripon, then I really feel there can be a ripple effect starts happening. And so hopefully over time we'll start seeing more people going, oh, the penny drops and they go, well, we could actually just make this ourselves. Wow, look at all this, we normally just set fire to that big pile of wood over there. Why don't we turn that into an amazing product that's going to give us this amazing benefits? And there's so many studies coming out now that are vineyard based or orchard based, or that are starting to talk about the benefits of biochar in their systems.
Yeah.
And more.
What are some of those benefits, Ben? Do you want to outline what does a vineyard have to gain if it starts making biochar and putting that into its compost program?
Well, I guess in their compost program, well, I think this comes on different levels. So in making their compost, they're going to end up with a superior product at the end. They're going to capture more of those nutrients that they've put in those compost piles. There's going to be less gassing off of nutrients that happens in a compost naturally. There's going to be less leaching of nutrients that happens when you're making compost as well. So you're going to make compost quicker as well. Seems to be a benefit of adding biochar to your compost heap. And I really feel like you're creating, the biology levels of that compost are just going to be off the Richter, because you've got this home, that honeycomb structure that biochar has. It's just such a great feeding station and home for bacteria and fungi that you're just going to be upping the levels there for those microbes in the in your compost. And then when you go and put that compost out on the soil, again, you've still got this home for all that biology. And then also, that another slow, it's almost also, you've got this compost, but you've also got this almost slow release nutrient as well going on, as well as, compost isn't always very nutrient rich, but suddenly with that biochar, your nutrient levels have really increased, and you've got this slow release fertilizer that you're applying to your soil. And then the benefits of water holding capacity, the amazing water holding capacity of the compost and the biochar, and the resilience that adds to your plants and to your soil. You're building that ability of biochar staying in your soil for years, decades, decades to come, and just continuing to have those amazing properties of holding on to nutrients, holding on to water, just adding resilience to our soils when we're getting such climatic events. I mean, we're in Central Otago. We get climatic events now. We're a dry land, dry land farming. We're fortunate to have a lot of water, but we get lots of water or we get no water. It's
Mm.
real all or nothing. And biochar adds resilience to that, where you're going to be leaching nutrients out your soil because you suddenly had another 5-day rain event. And then the opposite of that you're going to be holding on to nutrients and water in your soil when it hasn't rained for 4 weeks.
Yeah, no, that's definitely outlining why vineyards and any kind of growing system can be using biochar. No, it's a good outline, really. And we're making some assumptions, aren't we, that most vineyards and cherry orchards and so on are composting, and unfortunately that's not the norm, is it? Normally they're using an NPK-based fertilizer that gets spread on and makes the plants and trees grow really fast. But as fertilizer prices increase and there's more awareness of the fact that that actually damages the soil and does leach out, hopefully there are a significant move towards doing the composting, and then while that transition starts happening, we need to just get biochar in there because of all its cascading of benefits that you've just talked about. So it's a good opportunity, I think, to get biochar awareness happening.
I agree. And if you can be making it yourself, don't need high tech to make it yourself. That's the beauty of that. Say that digging a pit or, you can have really low tech systems that are low cost, yet your first burn, you'll capture all those costs in one go. Because we're still in those early stages here in New Zealand of biochar production. And so it can't, it's not cheap to buy. So,
Yeah.
if you can be making it on farm or on your orchard or vineyard, 1 or 2 burns and you're just seeing incredible cost savings, and then like you say, all those cascading benefits down the line are incredible. Um,
Yeah. Okay, and
yeah.
what do you personally use biochar at your place for?
We're a lifestyle block. Last 5 years we've been starting to do native regen on the property. We're kind of dry land hill country, and very little actual water that we can use for irrigation.
Uh-huh.
And so in the last 5 years, we've planted about 3,000 natives so far, and every native gets some biochar and blood and bone mix in the hole.
Okay.
And then we've done it with no sprays. We're trying to do it chemical free. And so we are then with a wood chip mulch and then some rabbit protection, and that's the love. Then it's like go forth, go
Yeah.
forth and grow. And good luck to you. And sure, we are coming through with some weeding and reapplying of wood chip mulch.
Uh-huh.
And we've probably lost, a solid 10% of plants.
Okay.
But we're in the really low rainfall area, and sure, growth is slow, but they are growing.
Yeah.
Um, and we're starting to see growth, and I really feel native plants just respond to having that biochar in the hole, that, hold a little bit, holding on to nutrients, the water, that fast tracking of growth it's really been added huge resilience to our native planting here. Because generally over time, because we can't use irrigation, we chuck things in the ground and usually they die. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of pine trees in this district, and I remember talking to this old timer, and she said, it's not that they didn't plant other trees other than pine trees. It's just that they just all died, and the pine trees, in a good year, the pine trees grew. You know,
Yeah.
there've been plenty of bad years where the pine trees didn't grow, and so hopefully we're just not in a good year where these natives are growing, but keeping the mulch up, they seem to be growing well. And so then also in our veggie gardens, we apply biochar. I put it through all our compost heaps, and so every compost heap gets biochar. We just do batch hot composting. We'll make a heap in one go, and I'm just doing it in wooden pallets and wooden pallet bays,
Uh-huh.
and we've got like 8 or 9 bays here. So I generally make compost over the winter months. I try and get about 100 litres at least into each batch of
Okay.
compost. So about a tenth of that compost by mass. I try, give or take on availability, I try and have that much biochar in the mix.
Hmm.
And then that biochar, then whenever you use that compost somewhere, it's got the biochar in it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's been hugely beneficial. So, any food tree, fruit trees, in goes the compost. Bigger the tree, I have to say, the bigger the tree, the more biochar compost it gets. The smaller that it's interesting, the smaller the tree, the smaller the hole you dig, and it doesn't make sense really. You should almost be doing that in reverse, but it's just that limited resources that you have.
Yeah.
Um,
And the bigger tree, you
yeah,
spent more money on it, so you don't want to lose it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it needs slightly big, it needs a bigger hole, and yeah, and you're planting less of them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And when
but
you
yeah,
when you plant the natives, just drilling down to the finer detail, when you put, say, you put some biochar into the hole, like how much? You talking about a handful, or you talking about a liter or 2 liters?
it really depends on the person. When you're planning a lot of that, you've got people. Generally, I would like half a litre minimum in each hole.
Okay.
So for me, that's, two or three handfuls
Okay.
would be my goal in each hole. And I try and pre-mix that biochar and blood and bone together, but sometimes you may have separate, but it's almost better to pre-mix it. And then, yeah, just literally you just have a bucket, 20-litre bucket or a 10-litre bucket with that mix in, and you dig the hole. You're barely digging a hole. You know what I mean? You're kind of a bit of a cross and trying to loosen up some earth, chuck in the biochar, take away a bit of that top turf, and then, as well. So the biochar actually helps because when you're taking away some of that grass competition, you're often losing some that all the good soil that you might
Yes.
have,
Yes.
um, ironically. But then so that biochar kind of almost helps you fill that hole up a bit, and then that would get a nice amount of wood chip around that as well.
Okay. And how
And I'm
how do you break the biochar down? What size is it going in with blood and bone?
oh 1 mil to 1 to 10 mil size.
Yes.
So nothing's above a centimeter, but most of it being that 1 to 10 mil. And we put it through a little wood chipper. That's more of a flail rather than a blade.
Okay.
So it's more like a blunt force rather than a blade.
Yes.
I did try it. I've got a New Zealand made Hansa chipper, and I originally started using that for putting biochar through that, but it got it down so fine. It was so efficient. So then I went to one of these kind of Massey, and that's worked really efficiently. It only clogs it does clog, but only through overfilling, because it's not got the scale to to deal with large amounts. So it's you're slowly feeding it, if you like. If you overfeed it, then it does kind of clog up. But otherwise, it doesn't. It does really well if you don't overfeed it. If you can
Okay.
just keep that nice trickle going, it'll go through it really well.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so it would be good if you send me the model number and I can maybe put a link to it.
Yeah,
Because I
great.
know
Yeah.
sometimes breaking up the char to smaller bits, you can do it by hand, with a hard, blunt object or a hammer and bang it, but very quickly your arms get sore and it kind of, the biochar that you crush cushions itself, so you've got to keep
Yeah.
disturbing it, moving it around. So it's actually quite a lot of work sometimes to break it up.
I
And if you
agree.
can get,
I mean, early on, I used to stomp on it,
yeah.
but it's only so much stomping you can. If you've got a buff load, perfectly, but when you're starting to up the levels a little bit, then
Yeah.
it's pretty useful to have some kind of way to crush it.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
did you, when you were doing the native plantings, did you happen to do any side by side plantings where you did put char in one and not in the other and able to compare the results or have an area that you planted before you were doing biochar and have you seen
We,
it,
we
kind of the difference?
Not really, because we really just kind of upped how we were doing everything. We really upped the care as well. So no, we just went all in because it was just so expensive. buying the plants, buying a cover, the wood chip. The wood chip we were getting wasn't costing us, but we were getting pretty cheaply. But
Yeah.
and then some, we were getting a little bit of help as well. All kind of added up. So yeah, we were trying to give every tree as much love as possible. But you're right. The next lot we do, and we've got a whole area we're really keen to do. We should go that extra step and see if we could do some side by side in the exact same spot. And but saying that's how Ripon got into biochar. Started going down this path. Nick Mills, who part of Ripon there, he saw Sam, a colleague of ours, had planted some natives just down the road from him on the road, using biochar, and Nick had seen how with no. I don't think they had any irrigation to them either. And he'd drive past these natives every day almost. And he couldn't believe the growth he was seeing in them. It was just blew him away. And that's what actually started him on. I think that's one of the ways, one of the seeds that kind of set him on, to be interested in it. So just seeing that incredible growth. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I'm doing the podcast is to get awareness out there and find more and more examples of just these little examples that's enough to influence somebody else to then change. It's all we need is lots of little examples that influence, right?
Definitely. Like I've got a little, straight line orchard I put in that's, we kind of built under that kind of food forest principles, but in a straight line. And we did a lot of biochar for each tree in this straight line orchard, and we watered the trees just on year one, and that's not uncommon around a place. And I've got fruit trees that almost dwarfed because of the I've mulched them, but they've just dwarfed because of the lack of water, and they struggle in our poor soils and that lack of water. And for those trees, we put biochar in every hole, and it's amazing the size of some of these trees on year 4 when we've stopped watering on year 1. And we've got big trees, that you look at them going, you're growing. Wow, what's going on?
Well, there's your proof in the pudding.
Yeah, and sure, we've got some nitrogen fixing trees in the mix, and we've got some ground covers, and we've got all these other things that are adding to the mix. But I've got plenty of trees that they're 20 years old and have taken 20 years to not get the size you've got in 4 years.
Yeah.
So it's definitely I see it. It makes me keep putting it in the hole, keep making it.
Yeah, great. Oh, that's what you need to see, eh? So tell me a little bit about your interest in the Ring of Fire. Tell me what it is and why you're interested in it.
We sell a bit of biochar. Me and Sam, we're called Black Mower Biochar, and we're very, word of mouth, and but we don't take any money from it, but we do sell enough to then spend a little bit on R&D. And I love the R&D is the bit, that's the bit I love most actually, is just the experimenting. I'm always trying to find, for me, it's about, the efficiencies, the scale, if we can scale up a bit. And I love the contikis, but you're often having to cut material down to put into the contiki. If you've got 2-meter pieces of material, or you're having to use a chainsaw, and I just don't like, if I can help it, I don't want to use a chainsaw. I want to be able to, if I can put material in uncut, I'd much rather go down that path. Yeah. So I've been following Kelpie Wilson over the years and all her amazing work over in the States. And I really do recommend, if people haven't seen some of her work, it's really worth having a look. And she's just released a book, actually. I haven't read it yet, but I must get it. But she, and you know what, the New Zealand way is, you see something. It was a bit how we did the Kontiki. You see something, so we'll just make it. And I've been seeing the Ring of Fire and going, well, I could just make that. But I really I could just see the amount of work that Kelpie was putting into developing the system and developing this Ring of Fire. And it really is just it's a circular steel structure, if you like, that just sits directly on the ground, and it's twin skinned. And I just wanted to, rather than do the New Zealand way that I so normally do, I wanted to just kind of be respectful of the work she'd already put into it.
Mm.
And so I got in touch with Kelpie and said, "Hey, Kelpie, look, I'm really interested in building the Ring of Fire and trying it out over here." And so she's been really supportive. And so she, after some lots of talking, she's given me the plans to build the first one, and then if we were to build any more, we would then honor that IP by giving her a royalty on every model built,
Mm-hmm.
going forward. Not that we're necessarily looking to go into production, but we may do if demand was there. So now we've built it,
Mm.
but by the time we built it, we were already in the dry zone here. So we've got this amazing Ring of Fire sitting on the ground, all shiny, ready to go. But the scale is way bigger, and it would be more, you would have multiple people feeding it, or you'd have a small machine dropping or a digger dropping material into the unit. But if you were to then in one burn, you'd be looking at almost 4 cube of biochar made in one burn. That's the appeal of suddenly scaling it up. So suddenly makes it even better for, say, a vineyard or an orchard who wouldn't necessarily don't necessarily do a pit style burn, and the movability of this unit. It breaks down into, you can just pop it on the back of your trailer, so it breaks down into these, it's a bit like a jigsaw part, like little segments. So it and barely takes up any space. You could put it on the back of your ute. So that's the other beauty. You can be really mobile with it as well. And I mean, she's using a lot in forestry in the US. And so I've been to see if hopefully it takes off here. Hopefully people are interested in using it as
And
a way.
you will be able to fit a 2 meter long piece of wood across the middle, won't you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah. It's pretty much. I can't remember the exact dimension across the top, but it's over 2 meters. Yeah,
Okay.
and it works out about, yeah, yeah. So it means you could just drop, that brash, that slash and brash that you're getting off, pine trees or eucalypt or whatever you could get going. And I get my feeling is, I haven't experimented yet, is that you'll be able to up the size, that diameter size, and the material that goes in as well. I found
Okay.
with the Contiki, we wouldn't go much above seven centimeters unless it was a very, very soft wood. But I feel like once you got this burn going, you could potentially get a lot wide, a lot bigger diameter.
Yes.
But then, then it's like, well, some of that wood then would be useful for firewood, and you're really just burning stuff that, you know, that's not so, it doesn't have other uses. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. So
if you were going to sell these, do you know what the price point might be?
reasonable, actually. Almost pretty much the same as a Contiki unit. We haven't priced it out yet properly. We're just still in that. We've only built one, and then we'll get a better idea when we build that second one. But I feel it will be in that $3,000 to $4,000 range, and possibly cheap. We want to make it as cheap as possible. So
Yeah.
it might be, we do a run of 10 of them and see how we can get those costs down and get it, as cheap as possible, just make it as cheap as possible. There's a little bit of fiddly stuff, and Kelpie's done all the work there. So it's just about changing it to the resources we have available in New Zealand. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have as thin as steel available on for the outer rim, and there's a few things where costs are a little bit higher.
Okay.
Um,
But there
and
isn't
and
any
the
welding though in the ring of fire that I've seen, is there?
No, there isn't, except we did do a little bit of welding just in the bracket. We changed her design slightly, but it was just because of what we had available in New Zealand compared to what they had available. And
Uh-huh.
what I'm hoping is we can even skip that out if we can find a unit, something for that bracket that's easier to use. Yeah, but otherwise it's really simple. It's just a whole lot of, some bolts, some drilling. And then some shaping as well, because we're using a slightly heavier steel. There's a little bit of shaping, just the inner. We tried to not shape it, curve it, the
Mm.
inner ring, but we found we actually had to then curve that slightly to make it easy to actually put together. But the
Okay.
outer ring was thin enough that we haven't had to curve that in any way. Yeah, bolts on easier. Yeah. So it looks like it, and I'm hoping that cost even gets lower, than that. But it's just, we are a small nation, and so everything more expensive. It's as if you're built in the building industry in a way. It's that
Yeah.
kind of steel. It just seems to go up in price all the time.
Hmm.
So if we can
Awesome.
make it efficient labor wise and be doing batches of 10 at a time, then that's where the savings are.
Yeah, it'd be great to get it to around about $1,000 or something like that would be awesome. Then
I'm
there's
not sure. Yeah, it would be. I'm not sure you'd even cover the steel
no?
at
Okay.
that price. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'd have to look. Only because our steel is a little bit thicker we're having to use, but also then you want to give somebody something that's got longevity, bash
True.
proof. But yeah, yeah,
I'm just seeing, at the rubbish dumps, and you've probably seen this in Wanaka, the hot water cylinders are unfortunately a bit of a throwaway product after, say,
yeah.
12 years, 15 years, and their outer is made of that thin steel. And I think that if they were taken off, they could be joined together to do the outer
Oh,
fire
definitely,
shield part. So that's a reusing material. And then
definitely.
the inner one do with, new steel that's a bit thicker that would last longer because the shield on the outside is not getting super hot, so it will last a long time anyway.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm actually going to look into that. That's a great idea.
What other interesting projects are you doing relating to chart at the moment? Have you got any others on the go?
Well, we just built that small education model, which you yourself just used recently, and up at that conference.
Do you call it the
And
barbecue, or is that just the
well,
name
I
that you're
think that's a
putting
really
on it?
good name. I hadn't called it the Charbecue, but now you've called it the Charbecue. I think I'll run with that. So we just had that built, and it was really that idea of being able to do a demonstration without having to start a Kontiki kiln because of just the amount of materials, and then got this workshop, and this kiln needs, this Kontiki needs feeding, and you're trying to talk and feed, and it's all too much. And the other idea of that smaller model was that, people love a brazier in their backyard as well. So why
Yes.
not, why not have one of these and you make biochar in your backyard every time you got some friends round, having, and then that we popped that barbecue on it, which, look, big shout out to Frank Strie again. I did just see his, it was his ideas really. We haven't copied his design, but it's the same idea really. And I also saw somebody up north, I think up in Otaki, had done something similar as well.
Yes.
So it makes so much sense. And you used it as a workshop, and I actually did use it one night here for when we had a barbecue, and it was I think it was for my wife's birthday, and
Yeah.
I ended up making biochar that night. It was great. I
Yeah.
loved it. Yeah, that was,
I'll give a quick description of what it is for listeners because
great.
podcast audio. So, yeah, it's basically also a cone shape, and probably the volume of it would only be around 50 or 60 liters, I would say.
Yeah,
But so it's a cone, and then you can basically make a fire in that, add lots of wood to it, and make some coals, and then it's got a vertical pipe on one edge, and your barbecue grill then basically just slides onto that pipe and allows you to adjust the vertical height so you can cook above the coals. And then after you've finished cooking, you could just quench it either from the tap below. It's also got a tap like the Kentucky kiln when you can fill it up with water from below, or you can just pour buckets of water in the top to quench it. And then, like you say, you've got 30 liters or so of char left at the end. So it's a two-in-one function, isn't it? It gives you some
yeah,
heat and some cooking, and then you get char at the end.
yeah, yeah. That's the beauty of it, and that just that you can show people on a really easy scale.
Yeah.
Either you're making it in the backyard anyway, or you're, for be able to go and run. We've been asked to do workshops, heaps of local community workshops, and we've always just kind of been, it's just in the too hard. You suddenly need all this biomass for a Kontiki, and you've got to get the Kontiki there, and then what if
Mm.
it's windy, howling or windy or slightly windy that day? It affects the burn, or it's a fire hazard, or suddenly with this little unit you
Yeah.
can hopefully do all of those things. And the next weekend, I'm not sure when this comes out, but we've got the Future Whenua workshop thing happening just here in Wanaka at Lake Harway Station, and we're going to we're doing a wee talk, and we'll have that going that day. But the beauty is, I've just been using it with pine cones.
Yes.
Turning pine cones into biochar. It's just so easy.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, what we did is Andrew just bought one bag of pine cones and one bag of wood chip that was dry, literally in like old feed bags. And we filled it up three-quarters of the way and did a top-down burn. So we made the
Oh,
fire
yeah.
on top and that started
Yeah.
burning down. And then as it was really going, we put a little bit more wood on it. So when the participants for the biochar workshop turned up, it was still burning, but almost starting to die down a little bit. And then what I did is I took my 5 liter paint can retort and put that on top, and that put various things inside it so they could see that, show them both systems, the flame cap method and then also the retort method. And after some time of talking a bit more, then all those little jets of flame were coming out the top of the paint can.
Oh,
And then,
fantastic.
yeah, after about an hour, no, yeah, 45 minutes maybe, then we quenched it all. And then I could open the paint can and show them what was inside it and get them to guess what the stuff was. And there was
Oh, right.
bones and the pine cones and corn cob and a few other things. And they could see that it was just the carbon skeleton of whatever I had put in there. And it was just such a good teaching point.
Oh, fantastic. Because I was thinking of doing the same, but I wasn't sure if the unit would work, if it would work well enough to do what you're just saying. But then you've just you've leveled up there, Dylan, haven't you, mate? With the pine, I love that with the pine cones and the bones and the corn and the cob cut thing. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
just
going
just
to
make the
steal. I'm
fire
gonna steal.
30 minutes before the workshop starts, so it's got time to make some calls, and then you're away. It's a
Right, I'm
little
going to steal
tricky
all
out,
those
but
ideas.
it's great.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, and you are also involved in the Biochar Network of New Zealand. What's your role there, and why are you committed in doing some of that volunteer time?
Officially, I was the first ever El Presidente of that organization. It's my
Oh.
only claim to fame. No, I was I was at the original meeting, and Dennis was going to become, that person, but I had to start the meeting for him. I'm the treasurer. It's a lifetime role because no one else would take it on. Um,
Okay.
but I'd had happily pass that baton to someone. So basically, I'm on that side of things really. I just do a little bit of that, keep that side of it running a little bit. Have to say, I'm not, I'm, you know, I'm involved and I'm passionate about it, but there's other members who are definitely putting on that committee are putting way more time in than I am. But as a group, we're just trying to promote biochar use in New Zealand and at all levels, and from the somebody in their household with a paint tin to somebody like Andrew who's on the committee with his next level biochar making unit. So we're just trying to get people, the knowledge out there and trying to also influence it at policy level a little bit with government, which is and there's a lot of networking between other organisations as well, but it's
Mhm.
really about just trying to get that use of biochar out there and all the benefits of putting that carbon in the soil long term and everything that comes with it. Yeah, I'm still in there trying to help a little bit. There's some other key figures, including yourself, Dylan, who do way more than I do. But yeah,
Well, it's easier for me because I'm paid, so it's
yeah,
not so much
yeah,
volunteer.
yeah. But still, it makes a difference. It all makes a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But like we did that workshop last year for 2 paddocks, and that wasn't we didn't get paid for that. There was three members there of Biochar Network New Zealand putting in their time for a day, and I'd even borrowed a friend's machine as well to help us that day just get going.
Hmm.
And but hopefully the ripple effects of that hopefully are good. 2 paddocks has a big social media presence themselves, and hopefully it grows.
Yeah, yeah. I've got to ask Ben, why are you called Dr. Compost? And did you come up with that as your own marketing tool? Or did somebody else give you that name?
no, I did come up with that idea. I'd been doing some a few workshops here and there, and some with Wanaka Wastebusters, and Sue Coots at the time, who was running Wastebusters, said, "Look, we're looking to grow this education arm and do some work with council or more permanently. Look, do you want to come back? We'd really like you to carry. You've been doing these workshops. We'd really like you to carry on. Why don't we come up with some ideas and we'll come back to it." And so I came up with this idea of kind of just about being silly, more than anything.
Hmm.
Uh, and that kind of superhero meets geek was kind of my original idea, and so came up with the Dr Compost idea, and it stuck.
Fair enough.
And
Okay. I was just
yeah,
wondering, maybe you had a PhD in soil
oh
biology
no,
and composting
no.
or something.
I, I've been meaning. There's a guy in, I can't remember his name. He's in Glenorchy, and he came to my workshop, and he just finished his PhD in compost, and it
Wow.
was like I was actually meeting a real doctor of compost. But his area of expertise was on this really scientific. It was all about oxygen levels in a compost heap. It was all
Uh-huh.
about. It wasn't about the practical and all these other things, ideas. It was really interesting. But he was, a super amazing guy, and amazing, still is there doing amazing stuff. But it was really interesting. But I've always considered, maybe I need to either buy myself a PhD from online,
Yeah.
get a little, or even try and do something a bit more than that. But
And
it's
did
it's
it?
become funny. It's become funny for people. It's
Yeah.
become sure, we've really marketed that and continued that marketing and grown that. It's become a brand locally in this region.
Yeah.
Uh, and very recognizable. People go, "Oh, you're the compost guy. Oh, you're Dr. Comp." We've been doing it so long that we've got a really amazing market presence,
Hmm.
and that brand has really just worked really well. And that's down to the team at Wanaka Wastebusters. Really, over time, we've really just kept pushing that brand, and it's kind of been very funny. Been a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
We kind of need that for biochar, I think. We need almost like a little superhero character that represents biochar
Yeah,
in New Zealand or some kind of
yeah.
quirkiness. I think that's possibly one thing that we are lacking and we need to kind of
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
come
and
up with
and
some
maybe it's
idea.
something like I always feel there's a Dr. Compost in every area, every region, but then they haven't. People have got their own branding and their own ideas, but I really feel like regionally you could have something like that. You could do the same with biochar, but maybe it's a national uniform kind of idea where you have a Dr. Biochar or the biochar professor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But something that you might have a go-to local person maybe but the problem, you need some funding and some backing of that potentially, but maybe that's a great project going forward where we try and create these regional educational go-tos where people, who are promoting the use and are seen as the expert, and the go-to for information. And maybe Biochar Network New Zealand does something along those lines. But
Yeah.
I really, yeah, right, that's great because it is, again, it's about that branding. Yeah, and it's interesting. We get people coming to workshops who have heard of us for 10 years, but they've only just got there.
Mm.
Got there this year, or you know. So it is over. It's a time. You need to really build that brand over time.
Yeah. And be persistent, right? You don't
And
give up on you.
yeah,
Sometimes when I only get a few people at a workshop, sometimes I think, oh, the market has been saturated and we've used up all the demand. But actually, like you say, we just need to be persistent and wait for those people to
yeah,
actually get round
yeah.
to coming and doing a workshop or something like that. Yeah. Did that PhD guy with the compost, did he know about biochar and its relationship with
Oh, this was
compost?
this was probably does now, but I was because he's done a lot of work now with composting toilets and along those lines. But I haven't talked to him in quite a few years, and that workshop was pre my own interest in biochar,
Okay.
which I also promote to put down composting toilets, of course. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
All
but
right,
yeah,
I might get his name from you and then see
yeah,
if he is
yeah.
into biochar and then he could be another person to have a chat with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I should. Yeah. Okay. I'll get that for you.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks very much, Ben, for having this chat with me. I'll look forward to going back through it and editing it a bit and then releasing it as soon as I can. And all the best for your workshop coming up at Future Whenua.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for having me on, Dylan. It's been great. And I hope this podcast goes well, pushing the word.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much
Yeah.
for that.